Hello and welcome to The Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora. I call this show Birth of a New Dimension because we are literally, individually, and collectively as a whole humanity and as a planet and as a whole ball of consciousness out there, we are giving birth to a new experience of reality. So this new level of reality that we are giving birth to is the end result of the combination of the worlds, the formerly divergent worlds of spirit and matter. And we can take that word spirit and we can replace it with consciousness, or we can replace it with pure energy, or we can replace it with abstraction. And the idea is that there has been a narrative fiction installed in our thought process that says there's a distinction between energy and matter, or there's a distinction between the material, hard-edged objects that we can sense with our five senses. Like right now, I'm touching my table. I'll make a little sound here. Touching my wooden table, and I can definitely feel that is a material object. And there are also energetic qualities in the room that I'm in. Like there's light that's floating around, but I can't touch the light with my fingertips and feel it. There's heat. There's heat coming in from the beautiful sunlight that's coming in the window. Again, I can't necessarily grasp it with my fingertips, but we can feel and sense that there's other forms of energy. And this division that we sense is a cultural conception that has been programmed into us. So it's not necessarily truthful or empirical. It's a particular viewpoint that we've been given. It's a social viewpoint and it's part of consensus reality. However, we are now entering a new level of reality because that old consensus reality, like the story that everyone agrees upon, is the idea that there's a bunch of hard-edged objects in what we call the external world, external to your epidermis, and that your interior realm, what's inside of your own mind or inside of your own body, that's not affecting the outside world. And that's simply not truthful. So in the early 20th century, high-level quantum physics started to explore the idea of observership. And this is the idea that consciousness and perception can affect experiences in reality with actual hard-edged objects and actual pieces of matter. So this is Einstein. This goes back to, on the one hand, Einstein gave us a little bit more of an expansive viewpoint than what we were dealing with Newton. Newton just gave us the very basic observable experiences of being submerged in the physical realm. And Einstein and people that were all of his level in his time and place gave us the idea that our mind is affecting reality, and just observing an experiment can have an impact on the outcome of the experiment. But science, for the past 100 years or so, has not really been prepared to deal with consciousness as a variable. Science is very comfortable dealing with the things that it can measure or perceive easily with an apparatus. So we can measure length, we can perceive things with a microscope, we can take pictures of things with a photograph, but it's much, much harder to take a photograph of consciousness, or to say how much does your consciousness weigh, or what is the length of your consciousness, like how many inches is your consciousness long. These are much harder questions for science to answer, and science hasn't effectively built an apparatus that can measure or perceive consciousness. So although there is that underlying recognition, because everybody, loves Einstein's work and uses it for the basis of so many things, there is also that lack of recognition that there needs to be more investigation done into the effect that consciousness is having on reality. Well, I'm not a scientist. I'm an artist, and I made that a very clear choice when I came here. So, backstory: if this is the first broadcast you're ever listening to from me, I describe myself as a galactic walk-in or a galactic abstraction that is in human form, and that the journey that I took in order to come into this body is the oscillation of the genetic material of this body into a format that I have named the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So I recognize that people think that's a rather light-hearted name, and it is, and it might sound kooky. However, the concept that it embodies is very profound and very significant because it means that you can rearrange your genetic structure. Once a thought has been thought, or an idea or an innovation has been created, it's not just available to the creator or the first person that ever thought that thought. It becomes available to everyone. So although I might be the first person that ever conceived of the possibility of a shape called the flying rainbow lasagna existing, and I would describe flying rainbow lasagna as a type of hypertorus, what cube is to tesseract. So when you take a cube and you put it in a higher dimensional space, it becomes a tesseract. What cube is to tesseract, torus is to flying rainbow lasagna. So I just did a webinar that's all about the interaction of vortex-based math and the flying rainbow lasagna shape, because vortex math has as its foundation concept or proposal the idea that the shape of a torus or a donut can represent the possible, all the fun hijinks that we can do with numbers, like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, can all be represented as vectors or directional forces moving around a physical shape, and that you can even think of numbers as static nodes that have a waveform that moves through those nodes, and every time the wave moves through, it has a function that could be either doubling or halving or multiplying or dividing. So this is a new way for math and science to begin getting up to the next level of understanding. We're coming out of this level of understanding where numbers are objects that are, in a linear equation like 1 + 1 = 2. And now some more expansive thinkers are beginning to consider the possibility that numbers can be represented by a shape, by a form, by a movement. And people that are familiar with my broadcasts or with my online class, brief plug, Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, are familiar with the terms that I say, this interdimensional language, this language of vibration. It's the language of color, line, shape, form, movement, texture, and tone. Oh, let me turn on my piano here. Tone. Tone, like a musical tone. So these are the different forms of vibration, and that this is the language that we can use to interact with forms of consciousness that are coming from very different directions and are moving at very different rates of speed. So, all of this consciousness, it's all literally one consciousness, but it's not all moving at the same rate. And so there are real questions. If you are a fruit fly and you only have a lifespan of 3 days at the most, how are you going to have a conversation with a big giant redwood tree that can live for 3,000 years? There's a problem with time scale. So all of this is about, we're not going to communicate when we meet interdimensional beings. We're not going to communicate with the flapping of our moving mouth parts. This simply would not work. So this is also, I can speak a little bit to this when people talk about having experiences of otherworldly visitors or whatever. First of all, if the otherworldly visitors look like anything anthropomorphic, like one head and 2 arms and 2 legs, that's kind of questionable. If, a fifth dimensional or higher being would not have that form. Once we get into the higher dimensions, if you interacted with a being from the higher dimensions, what you would perceive would be slices of their being. So there's this wonderful animated movie that's based on a book, and they're both called Flatland. And you can find Flatland on YouTube. It's very easy. Just do a search. And it's very worthwhile. I encourage you to do it. It explored the concepts of, multidimensionality by looking at the world as if there's a 2-dimensional world that is populated only by 2-dimensional shapes, like flat objects. They look kind of like Pac-Man, and they just slide around on the top of a surface of a piece of paper, and they cannot jump off the surface of their paper. But one day in this movie, a magical event happens. A higher dimensional being goes and visits Flatland, and the name of the higher dimensional being is a sphere. And a sphere is the higher dimensional format of a circle. So the Pac-Man shaped guy that's shaped like a circle, that's flat on the piece of paper, when he meets the higher dimensional sphere, what he perceives is slices of the sphere. If you could imagine orange slices, if you're, cutting a piece of fruit, and how it's, some of the circles are small, have smaller diameter, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger as you get to the fruit's equator, and then they get smaller and smaller and smaller again. that is what the Pac-Man two-dimensional flatlander perceived when he met the sphere. And so if we, as three-dimensional objects, you're a physical, massive three-dimensional object, and you're also fourth dimensional because you're moving through time. If you were not moving through time or in the fourth dimension, you would only exist for one moment. And then you would not continue to exist for any other moments. We would only see like a brief flash of you, and then you would not exist anymore, because that would be the only times when we intersected in time. So you are an object moving through time. That makes you a fourth dimensional being. So if you were to interact with a fifth dimensional and higher being, what you would perceive is a slice of that being as they came into the level of reality that you are able to perceive. Just like the Flatlander Pac-Man guy is only able to perceive a two-dimensional slice of reality. So be very skeptical, be highly skeptical of anybody who says, oh yes, this fifth dimensional higher being came and visited me and it looked like whatever, an angel with flowing white wings and long robes, or it looked like, whatever, is any of these things that people are describing. And so that's one thing. And that's kind of a good segue into what I was speaking about on the webinar on Friday, which is the idea of some people are participating in this fad that is known as chakra removal or unplugging. And I wasn't really paying attention to it or responding to it for a very long time because I just really was considering it totally ridiculous, like not even something that I had to say something about. But then I started to, read more about what this is. And so let me just describe how there's a basic logical disconnect to me in the idea of doing it and even the practice of doing it, of how can it be even done. So I don't have my rainbow pencils and whiteboard to be able to do this presentation, but just in painting a picture with my voice, we have a ray of white light that comes from our sun, the nearest star, and that white light has a color recipe. And just like in recipe for making a cake, you've got a certain amount of flour and sugar and eggs and, delicious vanilla extract, whatever you're putting in there. That if you change that recipe too much, the cake does not bake successfully. So we have this recipe for consciousness that we derive from the sun, our nearest star, which is connected to the stellar network of consciousness, which is a profoundly wise and well-ordered system of intelligence. It's not just willy-nilly, hinky-jinky, a bunch of photons flying everywhere. The stellar network is like, let me get to my piano. Really good musicians. They're really good. They're really complex. They're like Mozart times 10. They've really got it going on. They know what they're doing. So when a sun emanates, the sun emanates life. The sun or the star emanates. It emanates life. It emanates possibilities and probabilities. And all of those emanations coalesce into what we call matter and the material world. And what we are doing here, experiencing this world in these physical, organic, multicellular bodies, is we are like a prism, P-R-I-S-M, not prison. And we are like a prism that is refracting this light of consciousness that is essentially unity consciousness. The light that comes from the sun and this color recipe, when it is all combined together into the cake of reality, all of those viewpoints or perspectives and personality characteristics all add up to the divine. It all adds up to that unity viewpoint. It's almost like the composite eye of an insect that is made up like a mosaic of many different facets of experience. And when we add up the totality of all of those facets, we get the unified viewpoint. And there's nothing wrong or bad or evil about our experience of being a refractor of consciousness that takes that unity ray of consciousness and splits it up into its constituent elements, which we correspond to the energy centers on the body. That's all that chakras are. Chakras, the Hindu word for spinning wheel, like a chariot wheel, and it means energy centers on the body. And I didn't invent that there are 7 of them. That comes from the refraction pattern of light from our sun, that there's 7 colors of the rainbow. And it's interesting that Newton did a lot of experiments with prisms and refraction and learning about the rainbow, and that he chose to separate the colors into 7 colors instead of 6. He did it for his own reasons, and I feel like that's accurate and insightful because he might not have known it. He was corresponding to the energy centers of the body. So again, in sharing this information, I am not some kind of a malevolent carpetbagger overlord of consciousness that is rubbing my hands together maniacally and saying, "Wahaha, how can I come down to earth and share limiting information with people and keep them enslaved?" Totally the opposite. I'm actually saying, wow, when I look through the telescope of my inner eye, when I attenuate, when I look at the world through my inner vision, this is what I see, and this informs my journey. And I found this information to be freeing as opposed to burdensome, just like learning music. When I started to learn music, and I'm like, okay, I learned the names of those notes, and I learned their pattern, I learned what they look like on the musical staff, and then I learned that actually didn't take away from my creativity at all. Like when I first started playing, I played by ear. I just did what sounded good. I was just very all over the place. And then I started to learn, wait, there's an actual system here, and I can learn the system, and then I can play even better music because I've learned the system. That is how I look at learning about the non-physical anatomy that we would call the chakra system, or the system of energy centers on your body, and learning about reality creation, which is like learning about reproduction, sex ed. When you start to learn that, you start to learn, oh, this is how the body reproduces. And it's not just, our bodies are creative, not just in the sense of being able to give birth to or parent a new little human being. We are creative and reproductive in the sense that our cells reproduce. And if you get a cut on your skin cells are able to create new cells in order to heal that. So we have this innate creativity that is part of our physical structure and our connection to, higher dimensional, less dense realms. And we also have a creativity that is intellectual, where we can come up with new ideas, new paintings, new songs, new words, new dance movements, new ways of making clothing, new innovations in the mechanical realm. We can create new stuff. And all of this is very special. This is a privilege. This is why it is good to be an organic multicellular being in the body down here right now, because I've done this a lot on all of these different webinars, spoken about the beings that do not have a healthy organic cellular, multicellular physical body, that they did not emanate themselves on a bridge of love, and so they have had to make do with type of machine-based containers for consciousness, and they don't have access to the same levels of creativity and healing and reproduction that people like you and I have access to. So there's something that's really good and special and valuable about having this physical body. And I know there's a lot of social programming and cultural programming of people feel like their bodies are ugly or disgusting, or their bodies are burdensome or have bad breath and have to, you got to brush your teeth and you got to get toilet paper and you got to do all this different stuff to take care of your body. And I mean, that it's like having a car. Like, you got to get the oil changed. You got to clean the windshield. You have to maintain your vehicle. And I'm Moroccan. I don't consider that burdensome in any way. I'm like, hooray, it's breakfast time. We get to eat something wonderful. Then, then we get to brush our teeth. This is wonderful. But I understand that there's this sense of drudgery that is culturally programmed in. So hopefully we can transcend that. We can break through that, because having a vehicle means that you are personally empowered in the material realm. So let's get back to birth of a new dimension. That means matter and non-matter, or pure energy, are coming together. And the matter that each one of us really owns to do this experiment with is your physical body. The cells of your physical body. You don't actually own your pants. You don't actually own your earrings that are on your ears, or your eyeglasses on your face. You don't actually own the house that you're living within, but you do own the physical material matter that you are inhabiting as your body. And that's a big one. That means that ethically, in terms of acting in the cosmos, you're allowed to do what you want to do with your body. And this is big. This is Why am I here in a body? I'm not just an opportunist. It's not just that I saw, there was an opportunity for me to come in, through the death of the previous occupant of this body. It's not like that at all. What I sensed was there was a great injustice and unfairness that was happening, not only to this individual, but that was happening to the entire time field. And that I was in a position to make a choice as an individual to vibrate the DNA of this body like a flying rainbow lasagna, and in so doing, change the genetic structure so that it could contain consciousness differently, and it didn't have to die. Didn't have to die, the physical death, didn't have to decompose. And at the same time, I will say there was a force field of grace. That's the only way I can describe it. That was placed around this body, because the flying rainbow lasagna process took a long time. It was not instantaneous, not like snap my fingers, not like that fast. It took months, it took years to transform the cells of this body and to really be able to fit my consciousness in this body like a hand goes in a glove. That took a very long time. So during that time, the body and its metabolism was kept going by what I can only describe as a divine force field, something really from God, like a knitting together and a form and a substrate that helped things to stay together during this process of transformation. So each one of us is free to experiment with, or to work with, or to play with the physical matter of our bodies. That's why I say all the time, your body is your instrument, and we're here in this symphony of life. And you are allowed to play the music that you wish to play with the vibrating strings of your own DNA. And I harp on this all the time, that DNA is not merely the description of physical protein structures in your body, like what color are your eyes and what shape is your nose and how long are your toes. It is also the integument that ties us together from moment to moment through time. So it is the dance of DNA. When DNA is unfurled in your nucleus, it's chromatin, and it's constantly dancing and whirling and twirling and twisting and morphing and being spliced and unspliced and being replicated. It's dynamic. It's not static. And in that dynamic dance, that is what shifts consciousness from one moment to the next moment. Literally, when I said you're a third dimensional being moving through the fourth dimension, that is what the fourth dimension is. It's a timeline, like a long skinny French bread, and every slice of the bread is like a moment of time. And you are moving through from birth, one end of the bread, to death, the other end of the bread. But the idea is that there's not only one piece of bread, there's not only one loaf of bread out there in the world, there's a whole bakery full of French breads that you can travel on as your timelines. And this is the time vortex. I draw this all the time. And if we are understanding the fifth dimension and higher, the fifth dimension is really the bakery, the quantum bakery, where events in reality are made into physical things that have the possibility for us to experience with our physical body. So the fifth dimension is a place of possibility and potentiality. It's like where all of the ingredients to make bread, like water and flour and yeast and ovens, exist, but that bread is not yet formed in its format. So part of the process of observership, that is humanity and perception affecting reality, I like to say it's like you have ovens in front of your eyes, and the world around us is this amorphous mass of dough or cake batter. And everywhere you look with your eyes, everywhere you perceive with your own consciousness or sense of awareness, you are baking the bread of reality. And we bake that bread of reality. It's not just with our senses, because we take the information that comes from our senses and then we run it through our system of perception. And perception is part of that narrative structure, the story that we are taught as humans. It's the story of what is matter, what is energy, and how is the world created, and how does the world hold together. So humans have been objective materialists for many hundreds of years, and that says, well, objects just are what they are. Like, that plate is blue. It's not blue because I'm looking at it and making it blue. It just is blue. And that was the work of Newton, the physicist, and that was a step up from the superstition and the unproven allegations that were going on in the Dark Ages, because back then it would have been like, I'm looking at this plate and it's blue. It's blue because a witch or a supernatural being made it blue. And then we're going to, use that as an excuse to have the Inquisition. Like that is not a very good setup. So that's why moving to objective materialism was in many ways a step up, because we started to work with consensual reality, the things that everyone can agree upon. Like that plate is blue, and this many people can agree upon that, so we call that consensual reality. But then quantum observership starts to tell us that, wait, well, if we're looking at this bunch of electrons, then just looking at a bunch of electrons changes their behavior. And it's not just the process of looking at it, observership, it's the process of interpreting what we are getting in terms of information. So right now we are being given all of this raw data or all this information about the context wherever you are, wherever you're sitting. And you're running it through your filter of perception, which is acculturated. And this culture has taught most of us, or all of us, that there's a separation or a distinction between matter and energy, that these are two separate things. But the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is this tool that is not only, it's a genetic oscillation, and it also changes your consciousness and changes your perception, where formerly divergent realms now become communicative. So these two different realms that Einstein separates in his equation, E equals mc squared. We've got energy as the E on one side of the equation, and mc squared, that's mass, on the other side of the equation. They're in constant dualistic opposition. But Flying Rainbow Lasagna means that we can understand that mass and energy are, like the inside surface and the outside surface of a stretchy balloon of consciousness, and we can now make those two surfaces interact. And it's very similar to a burgeoning understanding of time, that up until this point, science's model of time has been an ever-expanding balloon, expanding outward from the moment of the Big Bang, but not recognizing the potentiality of the future. So that means it's like a balloon with no context, just expanding outward in a vacuum. And it is only when we place that stretchy balloon of consciousness and time in a context, we say, let's put it in a room. And that gives the opportunity to say there's something outside of the bubble. There's an actual potential future. And then if we vibrate that bubble of consciousness in the higher dimensional space, we get the Flying Rainbow Lasagna shape, which means the inside can now communicate with the outside and the outside with the inside. It's like saying the past and the future can now communicate, as opposed to science's former model of understanding, the narrative fiction, that the past exists, but we cannot communicate with it, and the future does not exist yet, and we're stuck to the moment of now, which I say to you with the analogy or metaphor that we are like ants stuck to the surface of a leaf. And we cannot jump directly from breakfast to dinner. We have to go through all of the intervening moments of going through lunch and going through the afternoon and then ending up at dinner time. So we are going through this transformative process, just like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly and gains an additional dimension. It changes its whole apparatus. It changes its perception, what it sees and how it sees the world. It changes its sensory apparatus. It changes its transportation apparatus. It changes its food source. Goes from being a caterpillar that munches up giant volumes of leaves. I don't know if you ever had caterpillars in your garden. They're not good to have because they eat all your leaves. But butterflies are good to have because butterflies don't eat your leaves. They just drink the nectar from the flowers, the most highly concentrated, essential, high vibration nutrients that the plant creates. So we are becoming butterflies. We are transforming from our material form. And matter, the material world, has as its root word mother. The etymology means that we recognize this, what we call solid matter, solid objects, or the level of light that has been slowed down to this speed and this level of density. That we recognize that that is like the womb within which we have been gestating as consciousness. And, just turning that off, sorry about that noise. Just like any baby or mammal gestating in the womb, at a certain point, one reaches the limits, the nutritional limits and the size limits. You can't stay in the womb forever. You've grown in there in a protected, nurtured environment, and at a certain point, it is time to be born. And birth is not the end. Although it is the end of the experience of gestating in the womb, it is the beginning of the experience of the next level of reality, which is it's greater independence. It means you're not tethered with an umbilical cord to your parent anymore. Now you are more free and independent, even though, when a human mammal is born, you still have to have your mama feed you. So you still have that maternal interaction, but it's not like an umbilical cord where you don't do any personal work on your own. And then as you get older and older, a few years older, and you grow your own teeth, then it's like, oh, now you feed yourself. Now you chew up and eat your own food. So we as consciousness are going through a similar level of transformation and birth and expanded personal responsibility and expanded mobility and expanded individuality. We are tethered right now through the umbilicus to the material physical world, and we are on this planet requiring the planetary resources in order to stay alive. It wasn't our original intended format, like I'm talking about, before the fall of consciousness, before, the antediluvian culture was destroyed. When we lived in that time, we had a different relationship to light and to nourishment, and we didn't require the intermediary of plants in order to stay alive. So right now, like if you look at some science fiction movie, they think we gotta have a clank metal spaceship and we gotta have some kind of a hydroponic setup inside of there so we can grow our tomatoes in space, right? Or bring all of our tomatoes ground up into tomato paste in toothpaste tubes and have enough stored up for 50 years so you can make your flight through space. And that's if you need to bring your plants with you in space, you're not prepared to leave your planet. Your plants grow on your planet. Your planet is like your mama. Then you have to be nourished by your mama when you're in the womb. So we are right now giving birth to this new level of consciousness where we will be able to create matter or create the experiences that we wish to have with our mind, with our non-physical energy body, with what would be called spirit or consciousness. So this means that we will be free and more free and more independent than we have been as gestating fetuses in the womb of matter, in that realm, in that level of matter. So what is happening right now? We are being given birth to. We're both the parent giving birth, and we are the baby that is being given birth to. And this flying rainbow lasagna shape is the personification of the idea that your inside realm and your outside realm become communicative, just like matter and energy, or just like past and future. So when most of us were little children, for me it happened in chronological adulthood, but I still went through these stages of development that people go through as a child. You develop your ego, and it's the narrative fiction that separates you from the rest of the world. Because when you first come here and you're a little tiny infant, you're totally connected to the rest of the world. There's no distinction. You're connected to divinity and all life and everything. And it's my personal theory that is why it's like so nice to hug little babies. And, you like to hug and cuddle them and squeeze them. They're very cosmic. They're very wonderful and loving and connected. And as the human operating system is installed, and as children are taught, like, this is your name and this is who you are, and children also go through a level of self-exploration where, they touch their own face and they're like, oh, I can feel my own face. I feel that when I touch that. But then, touch the crib or touch the pillow and be like, okay, I don't feel that. That's not me. Or they, put things in their mouth and they explore the world. They're figuring out me versus not me. And this develops into what we call the ego, the sense of an individual. There's nothing bad or wrong about this. It's a necessary level of development, just like developing the cell membrane was a necessary level of biological development to go from an amorphous mass of undifferentiated amino acids and goo and, sludgy stuff to being an actual cell with a membrane. And I use my tough guy voice. The cell says, I only care about me. I'm looking out for number one. And then, but of course, the next step up from that is becoming multicellular. And that's where all of the cells are like, wait, maybe instead of being a lone individualist, a lone wolf, maybe I should learn to work together with others and we can be even stronger and better. And it's kind of like, oh, wait, as a cell, I don't have to be a one-man band. I don't have to play the drums and the clarinet and the piano all at the same time. I can keep the beat with the drums and I can have someone else do the melody. And this is the cells in our body as we presently are. My tooth cell does a very different job than my heart cell, and they both work together in my body and they're not in competition for resources. So this is the idea that we as humans are individuals and we're like that individual cell, the tough guy that says, I only care about what's inside of my epidermis. I don't have to care about that guy out there at all. But when you really start to study things and you start to say, well, wait, if that guy doesn't have any money and he loses his house and he can't run his business, then that starts to affect me. And if that happens to many, many people, that starts to affect me. You start to see the interconnectedness of economy and ecology and human society and even, planetary society, like what humans are doing. Humans affect the microbial realm. When humans plant a bunch of genetically modified corn, it affects the insect realm and the monarch butterflies. When humans dump things in the ocean, it affects all of the life in the ocean, and then that affects us in turn. Like, we are incredibly interconnected as this symphony. So just like the cells start to recognize, wait, maybe it might be more efficacious if we actually banded together and started to work together instead of fighting each other. It's the same necessary level of consciousness leap for humans to recognize, I got a siren in the background, hold on. For humans to recognize that we need to collaborate and work together and not be in competition with one another in order to reach these next levels of development. So in transforming into a mental or consciousness-based society where we literally make objects with our mind and with our spirit, this means we need to drop a lot of what I call what I call the barbarian value system. And I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm from a different world and I came here and I've been here for about 16 or 17 years. And I've been shocked at times by the value system here of people that don't help one another and people that don't share resources, and that, it's like literally you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're disadvantaging yourself by choosing to fight against other people instead of working with other people. And there have been many times when I'm like, I just don't even understand the motivations of people here in this time and place, because clearly you would get more and be happier if you work together. So I've had to learn about the barbarian value system and the where it comes from. It comes from a certain level of development. You can achieve moderate levels of success, quote unquote success, by expressing these values. But at a certain point, you're always going to find a rock that is too heavy for you to lift on your own, or a task that is too difficult for you to do on your own. And it means you can't keep just being a one-man band. In the barbarian world, like if you're the guy with the biggest muscles, then you're the king, you're in charge, you can beat down anyone else. But at a certain point, even the king with big muscles is going to recognize, well, I can't build this giant structure all on my own, just, by lifting and carrying rocks that are what I can lift as one person. We might have to actually work together. And when you need to do that, then you need to actually have collaboration. And people aren't going to collaborate with you if they think that you're a big idiot or, a big a-hole and that you treated them really badly, like a barbarian. So that is the whole point, that we start to learn in getting to this next level of collaboration. It's just like music. You want to play with other musicians who actually are musically sensitive, and that means that they're not just jamming on their own jam, that they actually want to jam with you and make the entire music sound good and not just be egotistical and solo all the time. So we need to be able to work together with not only the other macroscopic humans and macroscopic life on the planet, like blue whales or elephants. We need to work together with the microbial realm. We need to work together with the mineral realm. Think about all of the chemical processes that humans artificially create. You're affecting the mineral realm. You're affecting the world of molecules and atoms and minerals, or tiny crystals. And a lot of that is not cool. Just like when we look at factory farming and people say, well, these pigs don't feel anything. It's okay for us to cage them like this. Like, no, actually, it's not okay. They can feel stuff and they have their own consciousness. Once humanity begins to recognize that minerals have consciousness, then it's like, well, wait, maybe this mineral does not want to bond with this mineral. Maybe I'm doing something totally inappropriate or unloving by asking for this chemical reaction to happen. And so they're starting to, it would be starting to understand that that is not in harmonic partnership with the mineral realm. And remember, I said science is not prepared to tackle the question of consciousness. It won't touch consciousness with a 12-foot clown pole. And that part of that is because it might mean that you have to reconsider a lot of these chemical processes or manufacturing industrial processes that like, hey, wait, maybe that might not be an actual good thing to do, not only because it's a pollutant, not only because it harms or reduces human health or ecological health, but maybe also because maybe molecules and minerals don't want to act like that. And maybe it is totally inappropriate and unloving to make them act like that. So these are just, different thoughts and different conceptions. The flying rainbow lasagna also acts across time to create covalent bonding and a new form of matter. So science is only beginning to understand the possibility of this when they're talking about time crystals. And time crystals is the idea of arranging molecules over time, like different slices of French bread. You can only see the entire apparatus if you can see the entire bread, kind of like looking down the time tunnel. We can do this too. We can flying rainbow lasagna an ion or a aspect of a molecule that wants to bond with another molecule across time. And this creates a new form of matter. So I have a webinar that's all about this because it's really easier to explain it with pictures. But it's just the idea that it's like layers of fabric. If I stack up several layers of silk or cotton fabric, and I can then take a needle and I can pierce through all of those layers of fabric and, bring a commonality, a thread through all of those layers and sew it all together. That is what we can do with flying rainbow lasagna. We can take one layer of reality that might be September 9th, 2017, and we can sew molecules together from an ancient time, from hundreds or millions of years ago, and we can also connect or sew together this moment in time to the future, moments that technically don't exist yet. All of this is necessary. We're doing yoga of the perception so that we as little tiny fruit flies who have a human lifespan at this point of 100 years if you're lucky, how are we going to connect with and interact with and communicate with effectively higher dimensional beings who have a vastly different time scale in terms of their lifespan? Because our lifespan might be over this fast, snap my fingers, to them. And how can you even have a conversation if you can't even get hello out before you're gone? Because we are like moving tangentially in different directions through different layers of reality. So this is what I've been saying about this interdimensional vibration language. That, okay, if you wanted to communicate with your flapping, moving mouth parts and you're trying to talk to someone who lives in a different dimension, can they even perceive the perturbations of the atmosphere? Like, these are sound waves. Can they perceive all the sound waves, or would they just perceive a slice of the sound waves? And how can we communicate effectively with beings? So this is also like everyone on Earth right now uses Arabic numerals as a common language. So people in the United States who speak English can still share math ideas with people who are in Russia or China that speak different languages than English. And this is, very freeing. However, Arabic numerals might not be perceptible to or understandable as a symbolic language to beings that are moving at a vastly different rate and coming from a vastly different direction. Like, can you show a star an equation made out of Arabic numerals? This might not be an effective way of communicating. So this interdimensional language, it is a language of, like, it can be perceived visually in terms of the paintings that I paint. Oh, and brief plug for me, you can look at my paintings and my artwork by going to flyingrainbowlasagna.com and click on the art tab, and I should upload my most recent paintings. But that gives you an idea. This is visualized harmonics, like what you would see if you took a bunch of sound waves and turned them into visual waves and made them into a painting. And then, of course, we have music over here. That we consider that to be pretty music because it is harmonically nested sound waves. Now I'll make some ugly music. That's just my hand mashing the keyboard. And we do not define that as music. We define that as noise, like, uncontrolled, random, quote unquote, sound waves that do not fit together perfectly or harmonically. So learning about all of this is intended to make each one of us a better musician in the cosmos. Your body is your instrument, and the more you learn about harmonics and this interdimensional language and the symphony within which we are all submerged, like, you can't be alive here in this time and place unless you are in partnership with microbes. You got to have those gut bacteria helping you to digest your food. That recognition is necessary. It's part of being a good musician. So the basic gist is that first we need to tune our own instruments and transform our own consciousness to the point where we recognize the higher consciousness that is here on our own planet. Before you even want to jump off the surface of your own planet, you're like, if you got to get in a metal spaceship with your food and your toothpaste tubes, you're not ready. First, what we need to do is recognize, hey, there's a little tiny ant crawling on my table. That ant is profoundly intelligent. Like, most people are like, ew, a pest, squash it. What we need to do in order to really be prepared for expert star travel is learn to talk to an ant. Yeah, learn to talk to a microbe. Talk to the microbes that are in your tummy. Learn to be in partnership with the tiniest elements of life, including molecular, mineral structured life, and learn to communicate effectively with the planetary structure. Get to that level of the macrocosm to be able, the planet is alive. We are not on this dead rock. We're not on some sterilized thing. We are like analogous to the little yeasts or mites that live on my eyelash. We live on the body of a living person. And so, of course, vastly different timescales. If we flap our moving mouth parts, can we have a conversation with the planet? The planet lives for billions of years. What that would be like not even hearing a tiny little bit of our sound waves. Very difficult to communicate. So how do we communicate? So part of that is understanding this language of vibration, and it's harmonic. And once we begin to start to understand that, we see that that harmonic language is woven into or expressed through what humans define as the natural world, because you can see it in the formation of patterns in nature, like seeds in a sunflower or in a dandelion head or the shells of a nautilus. You start to see all of this profound order that humans can interpret through the Arabic numeral system, but what you're really seeing is everything is math. And I really love this book that's called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a very cute series, and it's a cute movie. It's just really profound and funny. And part of it is this kind of cheeky idea that Earth is actually a giant computer. In the book, Earth is a giant computer that was created by mice, and mice are super genius. Like, don't take it too literally. But I love this lighthearted idea that Earth is a giant computer and that it is actually like an organic computer, that it has a specific program, a set of ideas that it is running, and it has a denouement. It has a function or a goal. It's doing something. And I truly believe that. I believe that we are part of, like, I just brought that up as a lighthearted reference, but in all seriousness, I really do believe that our planet has a purpose, and that we as individuated humans, we're like musicians in the band, or like red blood cells that are circulating through a much larger being's circulatory system, and that what we do in our individual lives adds to or takes away from the health and vitality of this much larger entity, and we are part of the calculator. We're part of the calculations that are going on here. So that whole idea of, the chorefulness of being alive, the chorefulness of being here and having to eat and having to poop, it's like, no, you're actually participating in this giant symphony of life, and everything that you do, including what you choose to eat for breakfast and, the way you choose to live your life, has a profound impact on everything that's going on here. And so part of this is recognizing this interconnectedness and then taking full personal responsibility, because it's like, okay, if I'm driving to work in the morning and I'm spewing out my petrochemical, fumes out the back of my car, and, I'm eating processed foods, and it's not only what I'm doing to my body and what I'm, breathing in personally, but it's also what I'm doing to the rest of the planet. Why am I doing these things as a human? I know that I'm polluting things. I know that I'm eating junk food. Why am I doing this? And the answer is because of social constraints, or like, let's say, the social punishment and reward system. If you do this, this, you get patted on the head like a good dog. You drive your car to work every day and you sit in your cubicle and you eat your processed food and you get patted on the head in the form of a paycheck. And if you don't do that, then you get essentially punished. You don't get your paycheck. You don't get your money. So there are many social and cultural reasons why humans act in a way that would be considered insane. And it is up to each one of us as an individual to heal this insanity, to say, I do not wish to participate in self-destructive or collectively destructive behaviors, and I wish to use the creative capacity of my mind to create a better world. So basically, we have this imagination, this innate creative capacity. And the only problem is that this narrative fiction that says you're separate from the world and your thoughts don't affect the world and your imagination is worth nothing. We need to change that narrative fiction and bring it into a more truthful alignment. The idea that your thoughts really affect reality, your perception really affects reality, and you can become a virtuoso. Just like the more you practice the piano, the better you get. You can learn more complex patterns. You can anticipate other musicians, like, oh, that guy's playing a D flat. I know what the next note is. You can figure out how you can integrate better in the symphony of life. So this is what this is about. And I'm not just talking about like some kind of, Abraham Hicks Think and Grow Rich, like some of these kind of self-help things. It's not about that. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to align my mind just right so I can get a Caribbean cruise or, some kind of luxury item. It's not about that at all. What I'm really talking about is transcending the necessity to have a electric bill or a cable bill or, the car insurance bill or any of these things. If you transform from a caterpillar into a butterfly, all of your priorities transform. You're no longer like, ooh, show me the juiciest green leaves that I can crawl upon and eat. You're like, oh, show me the most beautiful flowers that I can flit to from, hither, thither, and yon and not have to crawl up the whole stem. So when we transform and when we give birth and we become beings who can create matter with our minds, are you going to create a bunch of gold? Like, oh, I really got to pay my electric bill. So let me use my mental capacity to create matter to create some, ingots of gold. And then I can turn that in at the bank and I can get some money and I can pay my electric bill. No, that is a very limited viewpoint. And I understand this. I use the analogy, like if you're talking to a person who's starving, a brief pause. If you give a person who's really profoundly starving, give them a magic lamp with a genie inside or a wish-making device, be like, here, make a wish. They'll be like, I wish for a sandwich, because it's like you're just so hungry. That's all you can think about. Like, just relieve my immediate basic near-term suffering. However, wouldn't it be a lot better for the person that's starving to imagine, if you can wish for anything, you use your expansive imagination. Wish for, like an endless banquet. Don't just wish for a sandwich. Or, wish for the capacity to transcend or abrogate the necessity of physical food, which is what I'm talking about. When we really transform into butterflies, we don't eat plants anymore. We eat the idea of plants. Just like butterflies sip on the nectar that comes out of the flowers, they don't eat the leaves anymore. So we are in that stage of transformation where we are now becoming consciousness creators. We create with our consciousness. We are creating matter with our minds, and where we overtly eat thought forms. And right now I know if I eat a delicious apple off an apple tree, I recognize I'm eating a thought form. But it took that tree about a year of sitting there in the sunlight in partnership with the stars, thinking about matter and thinking about the apple that it's creating for that apple to appear. And what we are experiencing in this birth of a new dimension is an immediate manifestation of matter according to your mind and according to your thought structure. So this also requires that we take responsibility as an artist, as a creator. I'm an artist. I make these paintings. My paintings I measure everything out. I do everything very intentionally. It's not like Jackson Pollock or someone who does a lot of drip paintings and splashes things everywhere. That's not what my work is like. So I take responsibility, and I do it almost like a thesis, like a paper or something that's going to be scrutinized, because I know that people are going to walk up to the surface of that painting and squint at it, and they're going to say, why did you paint this circle yellow, and why did you make this circle green, and why is this? And I'm prepared to, stand behind my work and say, well, This is the pattern that I'm working with, and this is this because of this, and this because of this. All of this in order to say, on my canvas or on my panel, I take personal responsibility for what I have created. I made those choices. I chose what colors to use. I chose where to put them. No one else moved my arm or made me pick up my paintbrush or made me only use turquoise or only use red. So I stand behind those as my creation. And this is what we each need to do with the events of our life and the health of our body. And even though, like sometimes on a painting, I might drip a blob of something unintentionally, and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta clean that up. Like this is what we do in our lives. Sometimes your body might become sick or injured. That's like dripping paint unintentionally. You don't just ignore it or pretend that it didn't happen and let it dry and get encrusted. You're like, oh crap, we better do something about that. We better fix that up. Same thing with if I'm making reality creation meditations, if I'm doing this Flying Rainbow Lasagna intentional reality creation, you can do rough sketches of reality. Just like I start off a painting by doing a lot of pencil sketches. And I say, let's do this in pencil. Let's see what it looks like. And if I really screw up, I can always erase it. I do that with my mind. I think rough sketches of reality. What would I like to happen in the future? Let's do a rough sketch. Let's think about this. Let's think about this. And it's not in indelible ink. It's not, a full commitment yet. You get to do a sketch and see what things look like. This is partnership with the cosmos. This is partnership with the rest of the symphony. And I know that I mix my metaphors of artwork and music, but I'm both artist and musician. So this is trying to use metaphors that everybody can connect with here. So the idea is we need to take radical self-responsibility for what is internal becoming external. Some people have a self-destruction program. They believe in their own personal death and the eschaton of the world, like the end of the world, the apocalypse, or the Armageddon, or the biblical revelations. And people like that are manifesting that internal reality as an exterior manifested event. And they got to take responsibility if that's your social and cultural and religious program and expectation, that's what you're going to be making happen. I am trying to create and manifest a different level of experience where we don't have to destroy everything in order to then experience a jubilee of renewal and freedom and peace and love. I'm saying we can renovate the house while we still live in the house. We don't have to burn the whole thing down and then renovate it and build it up from the ground, from scratch. We can renovate the house while we still live in it. And that means your physical body. You don't have to get rid of, quote unquote, your physical body or die and be resurrected or some kind of thing like that. You can transform the basic nature and the structuring of your body through transforming your consciousness. This is what birth of the new dimension is. You get to experiment with the material world, the matter that you are directly connected to in terms of your physical body. Bring it to a state of health and vitality, maybe even to an inexplicable state, to the point of what we would call magic. Maybe you don't have to age anymore. Maybe moving through chronological time no longer means achieving greater levels of decrepitude. So maybe every year you can have your birthday. You're going from 41 to 42 to 43 to 57 to 58. You're moving through time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to look more wrinkled or be more decrepit or, walk with a cane or get bent over. Maybe we can redefine what the journey through time is like as we are literally manifesting our bodies out of our mental experience. So that whole narrative structure that says, well, you're born and then you grow gradually more and more decrepit and then eventually you die. We can redefine that. This is what Flying Rainbow Lasagna is. We can transform, we can transcend. So this is the new experience that we can have on this planet, and having this new expanded experience is just the precursor or the beginning of the next chapter where we do reconnect or connect with otherworldly, far distant places, distant galaxies, distant planets, but we do the travel as a journey of consciousness. And we do it in the right way, not in a clank metal spaceship. We do it using nothing more than our birthday suit. So you got to cultivate your instrument and learn to play good music and play with the rest of the musicians that are in the band on planet Earth. And then eventually we integrate with the rest of the symphony because there's lots of other planets and lots of other places and lots of other scales. Like we're just a little tiny scale in terms of magnitude, like a microscopic or a macroscopic magnitude. We're very, very tiny. We have a lot to integrate with. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being with me on the journey. Thank you for learning about the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. Let's keep dancing like Flying Rainbow Lasagnas, everyone.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the host of Anti-Media Radio.